I'm Pam Sawyer, and welcome to Representative Sawyer Reports. Connecticut is so rich in its culture and tourism, and we're also very rich in the state to be able to have the department, which we call Connecticut Culture and Tourism. Within that department is someone new within the last 2 years, David Ballman, and welcome to the show this evening. Your title is Director of Historic Preservation and Museum Division. Is that right? You're the director?
Correct. That's correct.
I had to read that one because that's more than a mouthful, and I couldn't come up with a cute acronym for it. And I was excited to have you come today because in this particular district and across the region, for the 7 towns that watch on this particular TV show, the channel that carries this, has so much history. We were just talking about it just a moment off the air, that we had George Washington just down the street with Benjamin Franklin planning the Battle of Yorktown. And you can go across this region because you find just above us where we know that there is the area where the Civil War uniforms were made, and we know that the thread was made in Willimantic, and there's a museum there. We know that the fabric was made in Manchester. We know that the brass buttons came from Waterbury and all came back here by rail, and just up in one of the towns just north of here is where the uniforms were assembled. We have such a rich history. Welcome to Connecticut.
Thank you.
Isn't this great to have you here?
It's very good to be here. I didn't realize how rich Connecticut was in historic resources, including architecture. It's phenomenal. You can't go more than 3 miles without running into another incredible structure.
And we know that there are many museums in the area, certainly.
Yeah.
Now, the state does own some of the museums, however.
We do. We actually operate 4 museums. Old Newgate Copper Mine and Prison in East Granby, Sloane Stanley Museum in Kent, the Whitfield House, which is the oldest stone house in New England, in Guilford, and the Prudence Crandall Museum in Canterbury, which is, to my mind, really the most exciting because of the story.
It is very exciting, and
Yeah.
since my tenure being in the Capitol, she has become the state heroine, so it doesn't get much better than that, and she's just down the road in Canterbury as well. That house is fascinating. I have had the opportunity to tour it, and it is sort of alive with the sense, if you can think of a large home with some substantial sized rooms for that time period, that these young girls were in there, they were learning, they were studying, and it was a successful school. And of course, Prudence Crandall then has one student come in, and she is of mixed race, and it was a turn, I think, in Connecticut, and made people very aware right after this, but this particular story, and it carries on today, that she accepted a child that was of a dark-skinned race, and then the other parents got angry, and then she accepted more, and it only lasted another year, but it's such a powerful story.
Connecticut has, and I didn't realize it before coming here, but Connecticut, really, its abolitionist tendencies go, back to the earliest time in the United States that these things started to really become important. I mean, her school was in the 1830s, and the film that I just recently watched on Hebron, and that whole story about the sale of the slaves, or the sale of the slaves back to the South, that's in the 1840s. I think it's the 1840s. At least Connecticut passed anti-slavery bill in 1848, which is way before the rest of the country sort of woke up and said, we've got to do something about this.
We were, and I know earlier than that, we did say that people that legislation was out there that if you're over 25, you could become a free man.
Right.
That particular video, Testimonies of a Quiet New England Town, made about the Peters house, the story of the Peters family, Caesar and Lois, is a fascinating one because it had been legend, we'd all heard about it, and because of the generosity of your particular agency, we were able to get the money to be able to put a very short film together. Right. That story is about a family who was left behind in some respects. There had been a minister that had owned them. There was a mother and father, and with 8 children by the time this story takes place. But he had been a royalist. So at the time of the Revolutionary War, he goes back to England, he leaves them, and then later, after about 12 years, sends word to his nephew to sell them because he wants the money. They come and brutally take the family from where they had been farming, and they had become upstanding citizens in the town. They were beloved, and the town was pretty much horrified, and they had to find a way to rescue them. So the story goes on that they are taken down to Norwich to be taken by boat, be taken to the south to be sold, and the discussion is, well, if there's an arrest warrant out for them, they cannot leave the state. So they come up with a charge that they have stolen clothes from the local tailor, and they go down and they rescue them from the wharfs in Norwich. And the fun part of the story, which doesn't really show in this, but we have records of it, is that they came back and they stopped at every tavern on the way back, celebrating that they had brought them back. And the selectmen refused to pay for all the rum that they drank on the way back in the celebration. They then petitioned, they had a trial, they were remanded to the tailor, and they petitioned the General Assembly, and 2 years later, in 1789, they were allowed to be emancipated, and it's one of the, I believe it's the first known case of emancipation in New England. Yeah. So it's a pretty proud moment that we have, and because of your agency, and I'd like to talk about that with you now that I sort of captured this moment of time to be able to tell the Caesar and Lois Peter story. But if it wasn't for the generosity and the work that you do, this story would still be legend and be quiet out there, and we wouldn't have not only the movie, but what you brought with you is also the lesson plans. So that we can get this out to future generations.
They're incredible stories. And Connecticut, there are not many states in the Union that fund historic preservation and history the way Connecticut does. It was a revelation to me that so much is spent in this state. It's unprecedented. The film was funded through a special initiative grant that we offer. And besides that, we do probably about $2 million a year in historic restoration grants all over the state of Connecticut to municipalities and not-for-profits that own historic structures. I came from Illinois. The state of Illinois does none of that. They have no state funds for rehabilitation of historic resources owned by not-for-profits or municipalities. It just doesn't exist. And in most states, it doesn't exist.
Maybe we know that in Connecticut, I do know under my experience, that we have lost so many historic buildings in our past. And I can describe to you, certainly, if you're looking at, say, Route 6, and you can look at the 384 corridor. Mm-hmm. We know that from the East Hartford line out to the Columbia line, that we lost 110 historic homes with the construction. And when they took down homes of the old farms, and we've done widenings and that type of thing, buildings that were not able to be kept or kept up for certain reasons, and they fell to the public use, which is in one sense the duty of the state is to continue to do the best for the state. However, where we can protect and preserve, it's a huge benefit to the entire state and the region and the country and across the world. Yeah,
it's very, very important, and you know, we're all connected to this stuff. Some people appreciate it and some people don't, but you really, you know, it makes you larger than you are. It gives you meaning and connectivity that you just wouldn't have otherwise if these things weren't saved. It's extremely important.
Now, Culture and Tourism has another grant, and the town of Bolton in particular is in the receiving end of that for some money. We have the formerly known as the Rose Farm, the Heritage Farm here in town, and it needed some work.
Yeah, and we just funded, I think it was $55,000 to repair the roof of the barn and the cupola of the barn. And that comes from our Historic Restoration Fund grants.
And that's a matching grant, if I remember
It's a
correctly.
matching grant, you're right. So in this particular case, it's a $110,000 project, which will do a lot to preserve that barn. I just saw it, and it really does need the help. And you start with the roof, because if you can protect the rest of the structure, then you can work on the walls and the floors and everything else at a later time after you've kept the rain out and kept it from deteriorating more.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we know that certainly with that particular farm, if you get a chance to come and see it at sunset, it is a fantastic silhouette. Now that farm is, we were talking again off the air about the Rochambeau site where George Washington came. And you know, when I say that it travels across the world, I wasn't kidding. I was able to help find $55,000, I'm sorry, $81,000 about 18 years ago to do the archaeological work at the different sites across Connecticut to show the Rochambeau Trail and the importance, because that battle, that win at Yorktown made the difference, of course, in the Revolutionary War. So who knows at little tiny Bolton, you know, and we got this money, and we happened to travel to England, and it was for a very special anniversary, and my husband and I got to go around the July 4th, and we stopped at a place called Sulgrave Manor, and it was George Washington's father's ancestral home. How great is this? Well, it's around the 4th of July, and they were having a 4th of July celebration, and they had a reenactment. Well, I love reenactments, and we're used to them over here. Usually we see if they're revolutionary, the people dressed up in colonial garb, and it's very rustic. It's more sack-like in some ways. It's done in browns and blacks and maybe a little bit of color, you know, when you get to General Washington in his blue, but everything else is very homespun looking. I'll tell you, I was taken aback. I walk into this reenactment, and they're all red coats. It's all red coats, and they're all perfect and matching. It was very fun to see that. So I stopped, and the shy person that I am, chit-chatted with a lot of these reenactors. And I get to this one gentleman, and I'm talking about how great it is that they're here, where you're from. I'm from Bolton, Connecticut. And he said, oh, we know that you just are doing some work on the Rochambeau, and you got there is money. Are you the same woman? And now I've across the pond, and I'm in England. Well, the internet, of course, has made this very small world now of your reenactors. And money, I guess, is pretty rare.
Very rare. When
you're looking at trying to get archaeological work done on that particular time frame. So that was a big buzz for them.
Yeah, it's a very, very important site. And being up there alone, it's very haunting to think that's where the troops were for that march. It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
If you are thinking about the State Preservation Office that administers the rehabilitation tax credit programs, how do you see that playing in the next few years to help out?
I think we hope that an interest in historic preservation and rehabilitation of historic structures is on the rise, namely because of the economic situation we're in. Secondly, because of the importance of sustainability, green issues that we're facing, all of us. The greenest building is the one that you save. There's embodied energy in that building.
What a great expression.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a huge amount of energy in any building that's embodied in that building. And to throw it away, you're not only destroying the wood and the shingles and the bricks, but you're destroying all that energy that went into creating it in the first place. So it's very, very green to save a structure. So there's a national movement, as you know, a great national movement to be green, to save these structures. We hope that will work for us. And then there are all kinds of incentives other than just the sustainability issues. Tax credits, we have 3 state tax credit programs in Connecticut that are available, plus the federal tax credits. We are doing a major economic benefit study that will be out in October which will basically document the effect of historic preservation on the economy here in Connecticut. And I think everybody's going to be very surprised at the results. It's a great argument for funding historic preservation and getting involved with it. It's very important.
When we look at the HRF, when we're looking at the different funds, it's fascinating to me now that we are helping municipalities with some of these old buildings that they've decided to save. Here locally in this town, we have an old stagecoach house, and it's next to town hall, and it's been saved and it's been bought by the town. It's where our resident state troopers are right now, and there was 25 acres that went with it. It's a very special brick structure. It's the type of thing that you worry because a town would fall into tough economic times like we're in now. How do we continue preserving those buildings?
Well, as I said, the state of Connecticut, when it passed the Community Investment Act, provided funds from a real estate transfer surcharge that we all pay in Connecticut. And it funds open space preservation, affordable housing, farmland preservation, and historic preservation. And it's that fund that has been basically distributed all over the state of Connecticut to municipalities and not-for-profits for rehabilitation of structures such as the firehouse. It is what does the work. So the Community Investment Act is very important to protect and to keep from our point of view, and certainly from the agricultural preservation point of view, from the affordable housing point of view. It's very important.
I also know that that particular fund also helps fund dairy farmer emergency fund this year, because we had such a fear that we were going to lose that important part of our heritage as well, because of the change in the way the feds do the milk pricing and so on and so forth. And Connecticut was getting the short end of the stick on that.
This is really government at the best level. There's a problem and you fix it.
Well, the best part I think about that is so oftentimes the state's doing one thing and the towns are doing something else, and we don't get the chance to have them work together. No. This is where I think it's really fabulous. Right. You look at the town of Hebron, and they have preserved through different means the 4 little schoolhouses that they had, the one-room schoolhouses. In Bolton, the one-room schoolhouses have pretty much been turned over to private owners, and are residences or garages, that type of thing. So that kind of preservation is very important. And yet the maintenance of them is key, and it could be pushed off to the very end. But if they know that there's a hand up from the state, 50% hand up, suddenly there's an interest when things are on sale for half price that maybe we can get this done. But it also provides work for the usually local people who come in, who are the real craftsmen. As you describe these buildings, we know that many of them have this handwork done inside of them, whether they're hand-hewn the wood inside. Certainly the saws are all done by hand for these buildings that are over 200 years old, and they need a lot of work. Absolutely. If you're looking at, though, coming up now, if we're looking at the Connecticut Freedom Trail, that is something that I think has been taught to school children for a long time, and I think there's still a great interest in it. Yeah,
we are in the process of revamping our website on the Connecticut Freedom Trail, so I think that'll be a great asset for everyone in learning more and more about the sites across Connecticut that are associated with the abolitionist movement, and we're identifying new sites all the time. So it's very much, it's a counterpart to the Washington-Rochambeau Trail project, where we keep looking for sites that have meaning and importance and adding them to the website and making it available to people who are interested. It's one of the most exciting things we're doing now.
Is Prudence Crandall Museum part of that?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some of the Underground Railroad houses and so?
Yeah, I don't know the number of Freedom Trail sites there are, but They're very numerous.
That's all right. You've only been with the department
Yeah.
for 2 years. You get time to learn those little factoids that go along with
Get the
it.
figures.
When we look at one of the difficulties we're having right now is with the Peters House. We did receive a wonderful steep grant for that particular building to have some restoration work done on that, and the town had bought the building and had put a park in behind it.
Mm-hmm.
There was some state help with that, but mostly it was town costs. So now we've got this beautiful old building, and they get the money for it, and they think that's going to be the right amount of money. But they ran into a prevailing wage situation. And for those people listening, prevailing wage is a situation by law that if it is with state money, you must pay a certain wage level. You can't let someone underbid and undercharge and underpay their workers, even if it's a volunteer labor. So it's a real problem, and I don't know how we're going to address that, but we need to do that in the future, because I do know that we sometimes have these wonderful artisans that are willing to come in, donate some labor, donate their skills and talents, and we've got to be able to find a way to do that.
Yeah.
Because our dollars will go farther.
Absolutely.
For each and every one of these projects.
And it takes a very high level of training to work on some of these houses. The interesting thing is that the Peters House and the Prudence Crandall House in Canterbury are of the same period, of the same time. They're both really extraordinarily beautiful federal houses. And they're sophisticated and refined houses. And you can't just use anybody to do the rehabilitation on these. You have to be very careful who does the work so it's done right.
And sometimes these houses, we've been very fortunate that we've had people who have sort of adopted them, skilled craftsmen who find a love for them and they're willing to do more on it and whatever. So it's always good to find that next little $5,000 or $8,000 to do it. And sometimes you get $25,000 worth of work.
That's right.
Because they're so impassioned about it, and that's why we have to find a way to fix the law when it's in reference to some of these historic buildings, and there are only a few pennies to be spared to be able to do it. And it's not stimulus money that's coming down that could be printed somewhere else. It's going to fall from heaven to be able to do this. Now, your particular agency took a hit this last year, though, in the budget.
We did, just like every other agency. We have done more with less, just like every other agency. And there were a lot of early retirements as well. So we are working harder than ever and hopeful that our current level of funding will remain. But the really good stuff that we do comes from our special funding, like the Community Investment Act. So we hope there's already been a sweep of monies from the Community Investment Act to help defray the state budget. And we hope that will be it, and we can continue to fund these important projects.
And it's going to be difficult because
it's going to be very difficult.
In the next 2 years, we are looking at a $3 billion deficit, and that's going to be huge when we're talking that kind of a piece. When we're talking about a $17 billion and a $17 billion budget, you know, how do you find $8 billion between those two? So that's a real worry to me, because I do know that we can pull our belts in for a little while, but there comes a time that something's going to fall apart and we have to have the pieces to put together. Culture and tourism is very, of course, important to our state, where we're located, because we have this fabulous coastline, because we have this wonderful heritage that you're describing through the museums, and so it's important that we find a way to be able to continue funding it. Yeah,
our tourism marketing budget was cut to $1.
I think slashed and burned is good.
Yeah, that's the way to put it, and it's very difficult to do anything on $1 a year in terms of marketing the state of Connecticut.
Well, tell me about the museums, though, this year. Are people staying at home? Are we getting
we actually
people visiting them?
Yeah, our attendance has been up. We had to close Old Newgate Prison and Copper Mine because of the repairs that need to be done there. There's been quite a bit of deferred maintenance over the years, and it got to the point where we just could not have the public on site without endangering them. So we're working on all the museums over the summer to make repairs so that next summer we can accommodate even more people without having to worry about safety issues.
One of the fabulous things I know is that in our local libraries, many times people can go and get discount passes.
Right.
They can borrow them from the
Right.
libraries if they have a library card. And what a difference that
Yeah.
makes that for families to be able to go and enjoy these museums.
Absolutely. And they are all exciting. The stories that they carry are as exciting as the structures themselves. So it's a good thing for us to have.
How would you describe the house, the Whitfield House in Guilford? I've been there, so I got my own descriptions. But
It's absolutely magical. It's a very early house. It's an early 17th century house. And it has been restored many times, but it still retains the original character of Reverend Whitfield and that community there. It's magical.
It's a stone house,
magical.
very
It's a
different
stone
from what
house.
we think of around here. It's usually our wood structures, our brick structures,
Right.
perhaps, but it's stone with these huge, thick stone walls inside, that outside and inside, and there's it's petite. Of course, it had to be heated in the 1600s,
Right.
But the stones also keep it very cool.
That's right.
And it's very near the water.
We don't have air conditioning in that house, and we get by.
You get by.
We dehumidify, and that takes care of it.
I can imagine that's a big factor, certainly
is.
with most museums, is keeping the humidity down
Right.
for the protection of the buildings.
Right.
It's important. It's important. If we're looking at a website that people can go to find out, because we're not putting out the wonderful tourism guides
That's right.
in the past, but is there an easy-to-use website for
Yes,
people?
it's culture and tourism, all spelled out, .org.
Excellent.
And it carries information from all three of our divisions, from tourism, arts division, and historic preservation.
And that's three major pieces.
Three major pieces.
We talked mostly about the historical parts, and we're very glad that you've come to work for this particular department and bring your expertise.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
And so we'd like to say thank you very much for being here tonight. Would you just give the website one more time?
Sure. cultureandtourism.org.
And you'll be able to find out the different museums, but also other attractions, right, across the state?
Yeah, and tourism, we also have CT Visit, which is a wonderful website which really gives a comprehensive listing of everything across the state. And cultureandtourism.org carries information on our grant programs too. So anybody, any municipality that's interested in looking at our grant programs, survey and planning, plus the Historic Restoration Fund grants, it's all on the website.
And it's also available, some of it, to nonprofits, that's correct?
That's correct.
But it's not designed for people, private owners?
Not for private owners.
Very good, very good.
We wish we could, but it's state money, it's public money, we can't.
That's wonderful. Well, but a lot of these houses we're benefit from that they have fallen into these nonprofit hands that have belovedly care for them. I like David Bowman. I'd like to say thank you very much
Thank you very
for
much.
being with us today from Culture and Tourism and describing what we have as so many gifts in our state. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
And good night.